What's good? It's Carson, aka Found, and I'm back with the next video breakdown. Today we're going to be breaking down 25, my song with Luma. This came out back at the end of 2022, I believe, on NCS. It was part of an EP I did that had Die For You, Feel Something, and this was the third song on the EP. This one's been requested quite a few times, but let's get right into it. First things first, let's get right into the intro and see what we got here.
Missing little moments, it was easy just feeling alive. 2 a.m. wide awake, talking like we had the whole night. And I don't know if I said this right. No, I don't know how the days gone by. Missing little moments, it was easy just feeling alive.
Starting right off the bat here with this kind of vocal chop thing I did, and I can't really, my auto-tune is being really weird, so it keeps crashing this project, so I had to freeze it and turn it off. But essentially I just took a phrase from her lead vocal, which I think was I'm Not 25.
I don't know how to do this right. Little less 25.
So it's like around there. I think we recorded this together. We wrote and recorded together, and if I remember correctly, I kind of had her sing this phrase separate, so I don't know if this exact phrase appears in the song. Yeah, so this is, we talk about 25 in the song, but that exact phrase I had her sing separately in the session, and then I used that for this kind of thing. And all I'm doing to get this tone, again, I can't really unfreeze this particular thing, but is essentially a couple little altar boys. So just getting that like more performance-y tone, and then just some compression in the EQ, and then a little bit of like touch-up stuff like soothe and all that to make sure it's not like harsh on the ears. But that's the main thing, and then the auto-tune gives it that, like, you know, the auto-tune sound. But if you're using, you know, Ableton, you can use auto shift for Ableton 12. Auto shift is great. It honestly sounds like, and I've replaced a couple of these with auto shift, a couple of the auto tunes that I had, because in my opinion it sounds almost as good as auto-tune. It's not quite the same, but it gets you like 95% of the way there. So and auto-tune has so many issues with just other things, so any chance I have to replace it, I'm always looking to do that. Starting out with this nice guitar, and this is some guitar that I recorded in a separate project. Basically what I do is, you know, bounce the whole song as like a WAV file, bring it to another project, and record in there, just so I don't have to deal with latency issues or CPU issues, anything like that. And then I did all the processing in there as well, because what I use for my guitar sim, I use the archetype stuff. So Tim Henson, PreChorus, those are the two main ones I use. I think I might have the Corey Wong one. I don't know if I actually have it, but I used to use this one a little bit, but I don't think I actually ended up buying it. But the Tim Henson and the PreChorus ones are like how I get the majority of my tone, and that's what we got here. And then with another layer. And so this is some open chords with like a finger, you know, strum pattern here. Just real nice and clean, nothing crazy. And then here I'm just doing some additional processing. So I've got this ozone, just to kind of basically like a spectral EQ. Just a shaping in or reining in some of that 2 to 5K, which tends to can get a little out of control on some guitar stuff. A little radiator, I don't use this as much anymore, but it's great for if you want to keep it still pretty clean, but have just a little bit of breakup, a little bit more like weight to it. So this is a great little plugin for that. RBox, you've seen this in my other videos. I don't really use this much anymore, but basically like an LA2A compressor. And then I've got this little like decap stuff that comes in for the saturation. So kind of kind of like doing an amp sim and then turning the overdrive on. I just didn't want to have to bring in all that extra stuff, so I just did it with a decap and snap heap. And snap heap, I believe, is just a saturator or just distortion on here, and then some filtering. But there's nothing crazy going on. And that's pretty much it for the guitar, especially on the intro. I mean, this is the majority of the guitar throughout the song, as you can see. I think we have some in the drop, there's some other chords, but there's nothing crazy. We have the other chords. Still kind of following the same chord progression as what the guitar is doing, just reinforcing that. We've got this phase plant thing here, which I can unfreeze and look at it, but I'm like 99% sure, yeah, this is just a preset. The majority of the synths and this one, except for the leads, I think are presets. Just stuff that I found. At this point, I was using a lot of phase plant. I'm not really using much of it anymore, so yeah, there's some cool presets, but the synth is it's a lot to kind of sound design in. There's super capable, but it's just kind of takes up your entire focus when you're working with it. So there's that. There's this guy as well. Another phase plant patch here. And again, I might be doing some slight modification to the preset, but it's nothing crazy. Cool. And then together we have this. And then I believe for this, what I did is I took these patches, rendered them to audio or resampled them to audio, and then threw a portal on here. And normally what I like to do, I did this a lot around this time, is I would throw, it's just a great way to add some texture, some like organic, kind of digital-ish, just a great way to add some texture to your like verses into chord progressions. Basically just resample them, throw a portal on there, and then record it out. So I would do like, so say if I just did this, I mean, obviously I already did it. I don't have the exact channel anymore, but have a portal and then pick a preset. You know, I just go through and pick one of these presets, and then I just literally resample live, and I just play with the XY pad until it sounds cool. So it's a little more performative, a little more organic, and that's kind of how I got this bass texture here. This, and then I just started throwing some more stuff on here. So I've got this LFO, which I'm actually not using. This thermal, which is really just giving it a little bit more heat, a little bit more like texture. And kind of band passing a little bit. Some more band passing here. Shaper boxes, I believe, is what's giving it all the like stutteriness. Yeah. And then, of course, we got the phaser, giving the phaser. Faturator, again, I don't even see, this doesn't even work. I used to use this a lot. I don't use it anymore. Basically the same thing as like a saturator. We've got redux on here. This comes in at certain times, so like later in the song here. Just kind of like simulating like a little breakup. And then a limiter and saturator to kind of round it off, but without everything. So you can hear it's the same sense. I just added some of that texture from Portal. So you can hear me kind of performing that granular effect. And then I wanted it to be kind of more of a texture and tucked back. So that's how it ended with everything all together. So you can hear how it adds just a little bit more movement, a little more interesting, like some ear candy pretty much. And that's pretty much that. I mean, the rest of this for the intro is really just effects and vocals. For the drums, you know, you've got this like cool little, just a sample I found. And then I just kind of boosted. You know, I really like that like metallic-y tone that was happening. So I just kind of boosted that there. And we've got this guy. It's just kind of an additional layer here, basically like a snap. Just to kind of keep it moving in the intro. The effects. And then here we just got a couple different things going on. This is from a pack. I basically have this like anime pack from the 90s or something that I found. I can't remember. It's like digital or online archive or internet archive or something. And that's where a lot of these are from. And then I just kind of like, you know, made little loops out of them. Some of these are just the raw samples. I thought it sounded really cool. You got this, and then this guy. So just a collection of interesting sounding samples, basically. And then you have this ambient thing going on here. This is actually something I got from my friend Sabai. This is a background vocal he uses in a lot of his songs, and I just kind of like stole it. But he knows I use it. And yeah, it's just kind of like a nice harmonic layer. Let's see, it comes in somewhere. I might not use it. I think I turned it off until the second drop, actually, it looks like. But yeah, that's the sound there. So if you listen closely to Sabai track, you'll hear it. He uses it in most of his music. And I just like, I think we did a session a couple years ago, and it was just like, oh wow, that works so well. So I think it was on our collab, The Call. So that's where that came from. And then we've got this other kind of layer. It's like a harmonic layer. And so this was something I did a lot in my productions, like 2020 to 2023-ish, was doing these like chord switch ups going into the chorus or the pre. So you can hear how we kind of have a whole progression change. And then we have the lead that comes in and starts being teased. And this is a whole new set of synths as well. So it's like a really kind of not a full vibe change, but new synths, new sound design, everything comes in. So we've got this guy, very basic silent patch. It's I can show you real quick. It's just a couple of saw waves and then an eighth note staccato like stab thing. And I just have like a mod on the cutoff filter. This is something I've used in my productions for like 10 years. This is a staple sound of mine. And it just, for me, always has sounded best with silent. So nothing crazy there. We have literally a copy of that, but an octave higher. Same chords, just an octave higher. And then I'm now, decided to go with phase plan on this one. Again, this was just at a time where I was using phase plan a lot, just going through different presets. I think I had just gotten it or got it like a little bit before this. So I was trying to utilize it as much as possible. And then this was also a mainstay in a lot of my production the past few years. I haven't used it much recently, but this is Omnisphere patch that it's just this afterglow, which is just one of my favorite patches in Omnisphere, and it just sounds really nice. Just a little bit EQ to get like really high end. On its own, it's kind of harsh, but when it goes in with everything, it's just really pushed OTT'd, but it's just kind of this cool breathy layer that gets added to it. So let's refreeze that. Here we've got like I said, the lead that gets teased. So this little like pedal note almost. It's basically just a pedal note with a couple of like octave jumps. And that patch was it's just a preset on silent. There's nothing crazy with that. And then I've got this kind of like, again, kind of like a pedal note as well, but it's just hitting kind of more every so often. But it just sounds cool, kind of keeps the rhythm a little bit more. But and then there's this guy, which is, again, yet another pluck. So all of these together are just background plucks. Again, something I used to do a lot. I don't do as much anymore, but it was just like a mainstay of one of my productions, or my production style. And then the main thing though is this piano lead. So if I remember correctly, this is just M1 pianos. So I think I have, this is the Korg M1. Great plugin for like those classic, I think we're like DMX is the type of piano sound that I'm getting here. But it's just basically a preset. We have Dream Night preset, and then the other one, the body should be Piano 2 if I remember, or Piano Mix 1. So I basically switch back and forth between Piano Mix 1 and Piano Mix 2. They're both really good, and they kind of, Piano Mix 2 is more that traditional house piano sound, and I think it just layers really nicely. And overall, to be honest, I feel like I'm kind of overcooking the sound here. Definitely a little too pushed in my opinion, but this is kind of what I went with. This is the style I had at the time. So some soothe, a little bit of transient shaping, some OTT, EQ, just take off the lows, fresh air to bring that back, some Saturn just to kind of crunch it up a bit more, and just so you hear it without all this. So, to be honest, a lot of extra plugins for what I was really trying to do. I probably could have achieved a very similar sound with an EQ and a saturator. But at this time, I was doing a lot of stacking and trying to, like, you know, just come up with unique tones. So that's what I did here. This plugin is actually really good, and I could probably achieve the same sound with just this plugin. But it's basically a tube and tape saturator combo. And here I've got both the tube and the tape saturation. So, and like I said, multiple rounds of fresh air, saturator, and then this, which is basically just a sausage clip or sausage fattener and a clipper combined. And then in that part as well, we've got the sub. This is another Omnisphere patch. This is from a friend of mine who put me onto this. It's called the Growler Moog bass in Omnisphere, and that's the name of the patch. I actually named it here because I kept having issues where my Omnisphere would reset and I had to keep reloading the patch. But the incredible like Reese sound, but very warm and not like EDM-y, like pretty pop, like the type of Reese that people would use in pop music. And so this was like another mainstay of my production for a few years. It was a great patch. The effects, we've got these little like lasered down hits. This guy here. You know, a lot of this is like those little effects. You can hear how they really add a lot more character to the production. So to me, like, that's where a lot of the character of a producer shines, is the type of effects they use, when they use them, and all the little ear candy kind of gives you more of your like your style, your taste, your sonic signature, if you will. And then looking at the drums, we've got this nice little ride that comes in. Great ride sound, actually. I do need to say this preset or this sample for later. Just a great ride sample. This also was a mainstay of my production for years. I love this build loop. It's literally just a pitching like noise slash hat sample that goes up. But it sounds great. Like, I don't know, it just works really well. And I've got this guy. So basically just a transition cymbal. That from the verse, and then this crash. And then it kicks in here. And so instead of continuing the build up here, I kind of wanted to do something a little different and decided to cut the build drums which I did again recently in the song I just put out, Where Are You Now, where I could have continued the build progression or build drums and have it like get bigger, which is kind of, you can see I used to have that. But decided, ultimately I kind of liked how it drops out. Kind of unexpected. It still feels like it's building with the rises and everything, but it's not like as in your face. And then now we'll get into the drop. And one of the main reasons I did that with the build was because I knew I was gonna have a fake out for those first, couple bars of the drop, like 4 bars. And so it feels like build into another kind of fake out and then build. It felt like it was too much building. So in this case, I opted for less of that build percussion so that I can kind of have it kick in for the fake out. And you can hear it start to come in there. All right, so let's look at the drop percussion. We've got the kick here. And at this point, I was actually using a blank kick from the PreChorus. I think around this time I had so I'm using the blank kick, basically no processing here, just transient shaper to get a little more pluck out of it. We've got the snare, which for this I'm using, I had a snare rack at the time where I'm using a couple different snares, and it looks like I'm using this dubstep snare that I made, just a little bit of EQ, and that's about it. I've got a snare layer that goes with it, and basically use the blank snare, and then just threw like a corpus and some stuff on here to make it a little more interesting. So without it, but I kind of wanted that metal sound, so I did this. Yeah, just giving it that kind of more metallic texture. The whole vibe for this song was meant to be kind of Y2K, like early 2000s. It was kind of supposed to feel like future nostalgia almost, kind of like Frutiger Arrow type vibe. This is kind of right before all that started popping off, but I had been getting, I was just kind of like going down that rabbit hole at the time and wanted to do that with this sound. So this is kind of what in my mind was like a Frutiger Arrow, but EDM leaning in my sense. So that was the whole idea there. And then we've got these little build drums here. So some pretty classic build drums. We've got the 909 snare, very little processing on it. And then the big, the Wave Racer snare, which I still use to this day. Just a great snare sound. It just sounds amazing. So just a little bit of saturator, and then this light rack, which is just an OTT with some EQ, and then a transient shaper. So without all that, it still sounds great, but just give it a little more punch. Okay, and then we've got this, just a crash and that sample from the verse, just carrying that over so that it feels a little more cohesive. And then the main actual drop loop, let's get that here. Cool. So we've got this extra snare that comes in, just chime snare, and really it's just like a more dubstep layer, and I just have it kick in here and there. Thought it was kind of cool to have it play. Thought it was kind of cool to have it bounce back and forth like that. The actual loop here, we've got this ride from earlier, the Allison Hat 2 that I use in everything still to this day for the most part. This kind of basic 808 hat, and then a nice little ride here, and then a crash, and that's it. Pretty standard top loop. let's look at the main synths. So that's in that fake out, and then it all kicks in. All right, so the organic sax that comes later, I do that in the second drop. I have it muted all throughout here. I just thought I wanted in the first drop, and I ended up not going with it. We've got a little bit of white noise to start us off. Very basic, just a white noise layer with the same kind of rhythm that's going on with the chords. This is the main saw stack. And so the majority of these are the same chords. So there's like, some of them have a little bit more of a stack to it, but it's basically just like stacking octaves and fifths. That's pretty much all that's going on. But these are the core chords right here. And the way I'm getting this sound is, I mean, very basic chords. I didn't want to like do the whole future bass thing where it's, you know, ninths and sevenths and 13ths and all that. I wanted to keep it pretty pop friendly and like down that lane. So I just pretty much did triads and, you know, maybe a seventh here or there. The actual like pitch stop thing, like how it kind of does a tape stop, is done with this Kilohertz tape stop plugin. And so I'm literally just automating the on off of this guy here. And that's what's creating that sound. I just put it over the whole group. It kind of creates some latency, so you got to time it right. It just takes a little bit of tweaking to get it to sound right, but that's what worked for me. Processing on this is really simple, just like a basic VR fat rack. You know, there's 1,000,001 versions of these floating around the internet. They all sound kind of the same, so you know, just that. I don't really use that much anymore, but and then we've got, let me refreeze that. We've got this layer, kind of more of a mid layer. This guy, this bandpass kind of high layer, and then just a lead that follows the leading, well, what I wanted to be the leading voice in the chord stack. So I just have that kind of layering in there. This is a technique that's still used a lot. Very big melodic bass technique is, you know, take the leading voice of the chords and then put that as like a just a monophonic synth and have it layer in with your stack. It just gives your chords like a touch more of direction. It makes them sound a little bit more cohesive. And then we have the kind of like the big crazy chaos layer all together with that. There we go. So you can hear how it really elevates the chord stack there. And this is basically, I think, something I got off of an A5. I think it was his Chaos Super Saw tutorial that he did on YouTube a couple years ago. And I basically just like, you know, made my own slightly different version of it. And yeah, and I just used it as like something that I do in like most of my saw stacks. So doing it in this one. Not much other processing going on, some saturation and a little bit of fresh air, which is just, you know, boosting those highs. And that's pretty much the main thing for the drop stack. And then for the leads, and this is like the, I would say the most, you know, noticeable forward thing in the drop. We've got these little plucks from earlier, kind of doing their thing. Now the main lead. So I've got this verb layer, which is literally just a bounce. It's a resampled version of the lead that I just put a bunch of reverb on and have it as like a separate thing. I could have just done reverb on the main track and done it that way. But I like this, the control that I have with this method is because I can like immediately say, all right, I want this part to not have reverb, this part to have, you know, I have a lot more control over exactly where I want the reverb to be. And I can also shape it a little bit more visually. So that's kind of why I went with that. But the main lead sound, these three is made up of these three sounds. The first one, very mid-layer, and these are the same patches I used for a lot of my leads, and like around this time, about a year before this time and a year after, I used these leads a lot. And so I've got this kind of like an ARP friendly lead, and it's basically just a variation of a Virtual Riot lead I found on Splice, but I just changed it a little bit. Got a fat rack on it, and that's kind of one layer. The next layer is we've got this is actually a stack of a couple different leads that I will automate through. So you'll see here I got a different sound. So one's a little bit more broken up and amp sounding, the other is a little more digital and like vibrato sounding, if that makes sense. So what I'm doing is I could try to do that all in one patch, and with Serum too you pretty much could, but for this I opted to do kind of like two separate patches, and then I have them set up in a rack, and then I'm like basically just automating between which patch is getting played. This is something I did, yeah, so that's what I'm doing there. The first one, hide that. So that's the kind of more ampy sounding one. Again, another preset. I don't think I did a lot of changing on this one. This is probably how it sounded coming out the gate, but throw a thick rack on there. Just kind of pushes it a little bit more. This is the other one. And that comes in here. Again, another preset, but a little bit of modification, and this thick rack, as well as this distortion thing. I didn't really do much, but that thick rack helps kind of bring out all the little textures in that lead sound. Cool. Yeah, I'd say the most interesting thing here is automating between those two different lead sounds to get that, you know, kind of more expressive lead. And we've got one more layer, and this is your stereotypical like wide saw layer. There's nothing crazy going on there, so I won't open that. Vocal chops, we'll look at that at the next drop. The bass, so we've got a Reese with another kind of drop Reese going on here all together. So basically just like a mid-layer bass and then a Reese bass. This I'm pretty sure is a preset that I made a while ago. Oh, no, I guess it's not. So I had this mid bass that I used in like everything. I guess I decided not to use it this time, but this is from Echo Soundworks pack, older pack, but still works well. We've got this Reese here. And yeah, this is the one that I made. So I made this Reese a few years ago and called it Art Bat because a friend of mine, Highland, or Elliot is his name, another producer, excellent artist. We went to EDC a few years ago and heard this Reese at, I think it was Deadmau5's set, and we just heard this Reese during his set and we're like, what the hell, we loved it, it sounded incredible. So we both tried to recreate it on our own and then did some modifications, and we each came up with our own versions of like that Reese bass that I think both of us still use to this day. So that's kind of why I called it the Art Bat Reese. The name of the original artist is Art Bat. I think they did a remix of some Deadmau5 song that he played in his set. Cool. And then a couple of things here. So we've got some color-based stuff going on here. I think this is actually, So yeah, I'm basically using some bass kind of cuts here. So that, which already kind of had a bit of a color sound to it, but then I'm adding the full color bass by having so this kind of chime sound, which is basically just like a saw stack impulse. I'm now bringing this into a vocoder. Here we go. And so it's coming, the channel 115 is coming into the vocoder, and I'm vocoding this sound with that. You know, if I were to turn this off, you can hear how that comes in. Pretty minimal processing afterward, just a little bit of OTT for the most part, and saturation. And then we've got a couple little fills here. This guy. And then this dude. So this is an old preset that I've used in so many things. It's an old Cymatics preset. I don't really do a whole lot of modification here. Normally we'll turn down the release, but just a great preset, like bass, pluck bass sound that just works in a lot of different genres. A little thick rack here. Nothing crazy, kind of like a fat rack, just not quite as insane as a fat rack. And then we've got the sub. Pretty basic at this point. This is basically like hip hop sub from Ableton 10. Just Ableton 11 on, they called it basic sub sign, if I remember correctly. So if you're looking for it in more current versions, I think this is what it's going to be called, basic sub sign. And then the effects. We've got that sub-I vocal that we mentioned earlier, and then this guy, and then this guy. So just a couple of different like ambient style effects to kind of help fill out the drop. A little exhaust, you know, stereotypical future bass or like melodic bass style stuff. Cool. And that pretty much does it for the first drop, honestly. Like that's the bulk of the drop. I mean, in here I do have some vocals, but it's really just like a stutter. It's something, which is basically just a pedal note. And then we've got that little lead, or the little vocal chop sounding thing from the intro. Basically using it as a motif throughout the song. We jump into verse 2. So, real quick, let's look at the drums for verse 2. So, the majority of this, we've got this little like break drum thing here, which I'm using just two different layers, kind of more of a breakbeaty sound, more of a breakbeat sounding kick. I've got this random Mother 7. I have no idea what this is. Just a sample on my hard drive. And then we've got the Cashmere hard kick together, and he just adds a little bit of top into it. And we've got this snare. I went through a couple different style of snares just to try to find the right one, and eventually landed on this one. Processing wise, pretty straightforward. The only interesting thing is maybe this transient shaper here. We've got the break loops coming in here. And so this is just some basic, let's see if I can show it real quick. What pack is this in? So it's the Jungle 1989. It's just an old breaks pack. This is a pack that everyone uses from trap to drum and bass. So it's a very, very popular pack, but there's a lot of really good breaks in here, and I just decided to go with this one. Processing wise, real simple. Just some ST4B for, you know, it tightens that up. There we go. And then a splice loop to help fill it out just a little bit more. And then we've got that ride from earlier. That's pretty much it for the drums on the verse.
Few late nights 'cause nobody seems to make the time.
Same guitar from before, and then we've got the same chords from before as well. Same bass and all that as well, so nothing crazy. But for the verse 2, let's look at the vocals. Let's look over the vocals. If you want to check out the full breakdown for this project, go check it out on my Patreon. For my artist members, you also get access to the entire project file, where everything you see here is going to be there. For everyone on my Patreon, thank you for your continued support. Really appreciate it. So let me know in the comments below what you want me to break down next. I've got a couple songs planned, but I'm always interested to hear what you guys want to see from me. So that'll do it for me. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.